A legal course of action.
A legal morse of action.
Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to a brand new episode of Legal Morse of Action. This is Patricio, and as always, I am joined by attorney Erin Morse. How you doing, Erin?
Oh, I am acceptable today.
I'm always worried about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it before the start of each show. Like, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. Yeah, let's do it. But on today's show, we have a guest. We're excited about this guest because you two actually know each other.
We do, and him and I, he's gotten here and we haven't stopped talking so much that you literally had to be like, can you save something for the show?
Yeah, no, the conversation has just been nonstop, and I'm like half the show already took place. So see you guys next week. No. But,
and that's everything. Thank you.
Erin, do you want to go ahead and introduce our guest?
Yes, this is Tom Feiter. He is an attorney who does criminal and personal injury. He actually handled a case for me, not a criminal case, a personal injury case. And yeah, we've been friends and colleagues for a few years now. We exchange, business tips and stuff like that, go back and forth, and have some similar paths that we've been on, at least for how our practices have unfolded, including when we signed leases and owned buildings and stuff.
But Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course.
We had a little back and forth a few months ago with like scheduling.
Oh, I was out of town that day.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what happened. I had the bench bar conference. Was that the day?
No, it was something else. Was it the benchmark?
Or was I called into a hearing? I don't know, something
happened. Then you'd called our office like, "Am I still coming in?" We're like, "No, I forgot to call you."
It was super
It's okay. It's okay. No worries. No worries. Happy to be here.
That's a lawyer's schedule for you.
Yeah, we're busy.
But no, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Yeah, thank you.
We before we started the show, you and I were talking in regards to we had a little bit of common ground when it came to German.
Yep.
And we were talking a little bit more about EDC. We were talking about a lot of stuff. It was actually a really, really cool conversation right off the bat. I'm like, I like this guy. I want to chill with this guy.
When you asked me, yeah, he was like, how well do you know him? Like, really well. I was like, I like him a lot. I'm like, this one's important to me. So, yeah.
No, and the reason why I'd asked that is because previous guests that we've had on the show, I've done research. They're doing their role here in the community, and you had actually mentioned his name multiple times, and then we recorded a testimonial.
Oh yeah.
For his law firm.
We did.
That's right. I forgot about that. Thank you.
And your assistant was very helpful. She told me what she needed.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Let's do something else. Let's have him on the show. Let's talk about a little bit of PI because we don't talk that much PI. We do talk a little bit of criminal here and there, but we really don't touch the world of PI. But as we dive into it,
because I sent it to him. That's what I tell him. Like, you gotta.
tell us what got you into law.
All right, sure. Well, after undergraduate, I actually became a stockbroker, and I did that for about 4 years, and that was in 2000. And the next 4 years were pretty tough in the stock market. So
you like math, and you're a lawyer.
I'm pretty good at math. Yeah,
mind blown.
I know. Yeah, well, I worked in the securities industry for 4 years, and I saw a lot of older guys because in 2000, that's when the dot-com bubble burst, and a lot of guys were losing people money for a long time, and then I would see the Securities and Exchange Commission lawyers come in, and it looked pretty cool what they were doing, interviewing all these people, taking depositions, and so that really intrigued me, and I decided, I think I'll go to law school and check that out, or at least apply, and I got in, and I went to law school at San Diego, and I worked for the SEC as a summer associate, and hated it.
That was awful.
Document review. I was living in West Hollywood in Los Angeles, which was awesome, but at the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, this isn't for me. I need to be around people. I can't be in a room alone with just doing doc review all day.
I like how you said West Hollywood. I need to be around people.
Well, I was after hours. I was definitely with people, but during the day, I was alone in an office looking over, just boxes of information. It was very dry.
It's funny because every attorney that we talk to, there's one point in their legal career that they dreaded, they hated doing, but they had to go through it to get to where they are now.
I think every attorney that I know is like, I went to law school thinking I was going to do this type of law and thinking I was going to practice in this way. And then once they're out of law school or once they start working, they're like, I don't like this at all, right? I thought I wanted to do big business, corporate type law, and I did
Right.
that. I did it as a law clerk. I got hired there. And then I looked at the partners in the firm and I was like, I don't want you. If that's the ultimate goal, like I'll get there if I tell myself I'm getting there. I don't like the way that looks. That doesn't look like the future
Right.
I want.
Right. Yeah.
So I left. And
Yeah, I didn't think I'd be doing criminal law and personal injury. I thought I'd be doing wills and trusts because I did. I worked with people doing financial planning, so I thought that was a natural transition. Now I'd like to do that as I'm getting older. I just thought it was sexier to be in a courtroom and do criminal trials, and it was. And I've done a bunch of that now, and it still is fun. It's a passion of mine. But
there's usually like a pivot or like something that changes that like that's the field that they want to go into because, like you said, Erin, we've talked before, you started off with business litigation, and then turning point, boom, now you're in family law. So what was the turning point for you that you decided to do, like, you know what, criminal and PI?
Yeah, well, I don't just do criminal and PI. I mean, those are the two biggest areas I do, but I also do a lot of victim representation now.
Okay.
I'm still a reservist in the Army, so I'm a judge advocate in the U.S. Army Reserve.
wow.
So that's another, aspect of my life. And injunctions is kind of like a hybrid between, criminal and civil. So I love doing restraining orders, stalking, domestic violence, sexual violence. It's really, it combines the two. So I like having the variety that kind of gives me more of a breadth of experience.
the spice of life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's nice to do the same thing day in and day out, and you do become an expert in it. And I do feel like that way with PI and criminal. But restraining orders and victim representation are something that I think are becoming more and more popular. So, especially with the passage of Marcy's Law, victims' rights advocacy is starting to take off. So, I've really enjoyed doing that.
I just thought of
I know.
something I need to ask you.
Yeah, shoot.
We gotta have to close the screen for that one. But
Well, no one. Unfortunately, sometimes the injunctions kind of like creep into the family law proceedings,
oh yeah,
and like there are different ways of handling those. And I want to hear like your guys' both takes when it comes to injunctions from seeing from his standpoint and you seeing from her standpoint in a family proceeding.
because I see it from a family side, and I'm sure you see it from a criminal side, right? So for me, I never think of my clients in a way where I'm like, Fifth Amendment.
Right.
I just that isn't mine. Is like, how do I make sure I don't have a negative impact on you having your kids, a negative impact on perhaps alimony. Like I'm thinking
Child support, yeah.
of other things that I need to have dealt with. I don't always, have a Fifth Amendment.
Sure,
I mean, I
yeah.
consider it and I tell them that, but my goal in the case is a couple of other things.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there's always those aspects that can come into play. Hopefully they don't. It's always better when families work out their differences privately, I think. Once you start filing petitions for injunction and you put your personal business out there, I think that just kind of muddies the water. And yeah, it's unfortunate. Sometimes it's necessary, but hey, that's life.
And not only just injunctions themselves, but also criminal cases tend to leak into family proceedings sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
A lot of divorces start with a battery domestic violence arrest.
It's true.
So, and sadly, by the time it gets to that, it's happened more than once, and somebody's been enduring something they shouldn't have to. So,
or the other side of it, right? Where one party, and this has happened a number of times that I've noticed, where one party will file an injunction to gain an advantage in the divorce case for custody. They believe that they will win custody, which isn't an incredibly strong concept in Florida, that there's custody for one parent or the other. We have shared parental responsibility.
time sharing now, co-parenting, yeah.
So there's not really a whole lot of I'll prove that he's a bad guy and therefore can't see the children. You saw the sign of my office. It's not illegal to be an asshole. You'll still have you can be a jerk and still have your kids. So
I mean,
that's the sad thing. That is those are the two sides of your injunction, is that sometimes they're used to gain an advantage in the divorce, and then sometimes they're legitimate, right? And
I think that's true, Erin. Yeah. I mean, look, the tough part about injunctions is that they're quasi-criminal because nowadays they show up on background checks, Even if it gets dismissed, there's still a public record that's been created and accusations are out there. And there's no official seal or expunge mechanism for a stalking or domestic violence or sexual violence injunction.
And
Or
there
dating
is in
violence.
other states. In other
There
states,
may
they
be,
have
yeah.
they have
Do they?
something that's. I listened to a podcast about it actually.
Yeah.
They have a way where they could seal a case, especially if they were like acquitted, so it doesn't show up when you search
Mm-hmm. Right.
for it or do a background check for them.
I think maybe that's how it should be here in Florida too. But right now, yeah, every county's different. You know, if somebody tried to get an injunction against you, like say 10 years ago in Orange County, and it was denied, that injunction, you still might be able to find it on the clerk of court's record just by
the filing itself.
the
It
filing
happens
with
all
the
the time.
accusations. If they filed pictures or text messages, emails, all those may be attached to the petition and maybe,
Now,
public
why
record.
is it that injunctions, whether they're dismissed or thrown out, why can't they fall under the category of expungements?
They don't need to be expunged. You weren't. It was dismissed. It was declined. It
Well,
was not entered.
Yeah,
So-
when they're not entered, correct. It's out there. There's kind of like a workaround. There's a rule of judicial administration that allows those to be made confidential, so we can do it. But again, like what layperson knows how to do that? So most people, unless they hire an attorney and pay them a few $1,000s, that record's going to be out there.
Right, and sometimes is the juice worth the squeeze? Because in some ways it still could be. I love that phrase, right?
I do too. I'm stealing that.
You're
Yeah, that's good.
welcome.
Yeah.
So some of the ways is that, the cost for it is high to pay an attorney to do it, and they might still be able to see that the case exists, just that it's sealed.
Right.
So what's a better thing to present to your potential employer? No, open the case. It was dismissed.
Yeah.
It was declined. It was whatever, or does it exists and it's sealed?
Right.
So sometimes like that little bit of suspicion may have an impact, whether rightfully or wrongfully, right? We know that they shouldn't, but we know that people do.
Yeah.
So sometimes when it's dismissed, I'm like, buddy, why don't you just let it be there and be like, look at it. It was
Right,
dismissed.
yeah.
It was denied, right? You tell them to look at it.
No, there were multiple times when at previous
Or
firms.
maybe if it's no prost.
Well, even today, I mean, people are getting savvy. In-house counsel are getting savvy. They're like, well, why was it no prost? I mean, was it because the prosecutor's office was just inept and they didn't care enough or they didn't have the manpower? Or was it because she changed her mind and wanted to save your career? Was it really dismissed on the merits? Like, in other words, did you really do it and you just dodged a bullet?
Yeah, you
Or
got a
were
good lawyer.
Or were you falsely accused, in which case that would be okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there was a workaround for what you're suggesting.
Oh, yeah, no,
too.
definitely. And there were times where I would speak with clients, on behalf of the attorney, where they would say like, "Well, it's being processed. I filed all the paperwork with the FDLE. Everything's going." I'm like, "Okay, show show the null pros, show that the case was dismissed to your employer, and talk it out. Let them be aware because you weren't convicted."
Yeah, the tough part is and people come to me, and even people who hire employees, they're like, look, we get 100 applications for a job and we have to sift through. I don't want to interview 100 people. The easiest way to cut that in half at least is run criminal background. Anybody who has anything on their record, just let's only interview the clean ones now, or even consider them.
Right.
So.
It's and that's hard. That sucks for people,
Yep. It's tough.
So don't weaponize it if it's not legitimate.
Yeah, but I always err on the side of just being safe. So I tell clients, go ahead and get it sealed or expunged. Do the motion to make it confidential, but to have a backup, get certified copies from the clerk showing exactly why it was dismissed, but still get it off the public record as much as possible.
And that's important right there in regards to certified copies, an actual wet copy
Yep.
of the document itself, because people all the time tend to just bring in, oh, here's a copy, just a Xerox copy. And
Yeah.
people want to see that stamp. It's kind of like, okay,
Well,
this
the
was
courts
real.
do. The courts require it.
Yeah. Sorry. Just pulling this up right here. So no, I wanted to talk to you, Tom, in regards to. Give me 1 second. I'm collecting my thought. I had it right there.
No worries, man.
Yeah, no. So with criminal cases right now here in Orlando, do you feel like you've seen a rise in more drug charges or more domestic violence charges?
For me, for my particular practice, I can't say to what is going on in the Ninth Circuit with regard to those two areas. But for me personally, it's been more domestic violence, probably because I have a better presence online for domestic violence and battery. But I do get a fair amount of drug cases too. I know this particular prosecutor's office doesn't want to prosecute as many, simple possession kind of cases as much as they were in the past anyway. But yeah, I think DV, especially with the pandemic, has really been on the rise. I mean, we have to a lot of people have to be indoors all day with their partner, and that can be pretty difficult.
And I love how you picked up on right where I was leading to in regards to the pandemic itself. Like, how had COVID actually affected you and your practice during these last 2 years?
Yeah, for us, I mean, it's for private practitioners like Erin and me, I can't speak for Erin, but it's been a really tough 2 years. Having a lot of our government counterparts, have, from what I've seen and what I'm told, a very easy 2 years, not having to work very much. I've had to, I've never worked harder. I've never had as many gray hairs come in, because really when the pandemic hit, I mean, a lot of small business owners, and those are law firm owners included. I don't know about y'all, but I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose everything. I mean, I have overhead, I have payroll, I have people who are counting on me and their families are counting on me to pull in enough business so that they can get paid. So I doubled down. I came in earlier, worked later, and just to keep the money coming in. So it's been a really tough 2 years.
And your kids at home.
We got kids, yeah. So that adds a layer of difficulty to it. But what was important to me is to not lay off anyone, and we didn't. We pushed through. We came in every day. I didn't have a 3 or 4 day weekend. I worked out every weekend through it and pushed through. So it's been a very tough 2 years. That's how it's affected me. But thank God I was able to provide for my family and for all the employees that we have. We don't have that many. It's like 7 of us total at the Feiter law firm.
I have the same amount of employees, and I had a similar experience with that. Is when this happened, a lot. The work from home wasn't that difficult because all my staff already had laptops. I just liked that system. When I set up my firm, that felt right to me. I wanted them to be, if they needed to work collaboratively, I wanted them to just go move their laptop and work together, or if we all needed to work in the conference room or whatever. I wanted that mobility. I wanted, not to put a printer on everyone's desk. So if they needed to print, I'm like, you have a laptop, just go sit next to the printer and, print the, because we do keep everything digital. So if we have to reduce it to paper to go to court, because it's still 1983 in the courthouse, but I was worried. I was worried about how it would be affected, what the courts really would do, right? Because that was a huge, at least for us and, my clients, it's divorce and custody cases. How was I going to answer to them on what the courts will do? Does the fact that COVID is happening mean I don't see my kids? Does one parent keep the kids and one parent doesn't? So we had a lot of that. And because the courts were shut down, I had no remedy for them. So for us, I was like, am I going to stop being, and that's how I make my money is
you have to get results.
Courts and
People
getting the
to
clerks who are
orders.
responses. And hold them in contempt and make them tell, what are the courts going to do? What do the courts say about COVID? I'm like, nobody knows. Nobody knows. So, we all eventually fleshed that out, but, we were all worried about that as a small business.
2 things. You were very forward thinking with the laptops, because I just started doing that. I had these big, desktop computers, and I wish I had done the laptop
Never
thing
had
earlier.
a desktop in this office.
Yep, I messed up. Now we just do external monitors. But then two, my hats off to you, and really to all solo and small firm practitioners, because it's really hard. You really, unless you're in the trenches doing what we do, you can't relate. I love, a lot of my great friends are, lifetime government workers, and that's great. But man, unless you do this job and you know what it's like, to make payroll and have, liabilities for payroll tax, workers' compensation, all these insurance policies we have to keep, you can't really get what it's like to be a solo or small firm practitioner. And that's a big portion of the Florida bar. I think the majority of practitioners are solo or small firm. So that's why I think it's so important. If you're going to be a government, a person like a judge or a state attorney, it's great to have that breadth of experience, because how else can you empathize?
And there's, even with little things when we're going in front of the judge and seeking attorney's fees and stuff like that, about when you're representing, I think there's also a difference with us is that we represent the little people, the people, like they're an individual, not a corporation, not a government, not a company, not and these are people who these little orders that seem simple is everything to them, right? And the amount of attorney's fees, because exactly like you said, it increased the amount of work. I had to make sure. The other thought that I had was, I still had this office space. I can't stop paying rent.
Right. Yep.
And my employees, I don't know what their home living situation was, right? Do they even have a way to work from home reasonably, right? Do they have a place where they could sit down and have quietness? Or, I had one employee who every time she had to answer the phone, she had to go outside.
Yeah.
That was not a great remedy for her. So, and how do I also, a few of them wanted to come back and work in the office because their home life wasn't great or ideal.
Right.
And I was like, am I doing the right thing by keeping them safe? Am I going to have a lawsuit? Right? Am I going to be sued as a business owner for allowing them to come in? But I'm paying this
It's a lot of stress.
immense rent and not using it.
I know. Very, yep.
So it was all, but
It was a tough time, but God willing, we're through it. Yeah. Hope so. God willing, it's over. Yeah.
No, I went to Mardi Gras this past weekend to see the Bare Naked Ladies. And it, honest to God, felt like I was back in 2017.
Yeah.
Because everybody was out, everyone was close, the parade was going on. And for that hour and a half, I, honest to God, forgot about COVID. Because, yes, we're kind of like going back into the normal routine, but there are still businesses out there who are enforcing, a mask mandate for you to enter their business. And all the topsy-turvy traveling restrictions that we're now seeing with the rising numbers in other countries. Do you feel like it's more of a recklessness on in this country, or what's your take, like here how we're dealing with COVID?
And that is not my area. I really don't know. All I can say is I'm happy not to be wearing a mask everywhere and not having to be told to wear a mask everywhere I go. I do think it has its place. I do think we have to, protect each other. But I feel like we're at the tail end of it, and God willing, it continues to go that way.
Yeah, I think it makes sense in a medical setting and going into hospitals and doctors' offices.
Yeah.
We got a shout out from the comments right here. Kevin saying, big shout out to Tom. I had the opportunity to meet him last night, and he's an incredibly humble and generous person. Happy finally Friday, everyone.
It's really nice. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, great guy.
Another Kevin I'm talking about.
Yeah. I love that. And, I admire him a lot. I saw his entrepreneurial spirit, and that's amazing. It's like, a lot of people, they want to start a business or they want to go out, but I think few people actually do it. Mm-hmm. And Kevin's one of the guys who's out there doing it because he has the courage to do it. And he's taking risks, and that's what it takes. I mean, I'm all about that. Yeah. It is scary, but you know what?
It's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So.
I'm sorry, I had this coming up. So usually during the show, I have questions that come in from listeners, people who call into the office. They're like, I have a question for the podcast. And sometimes we do like to have the guest take a crack at the situation to see what they would do.
He has a little family law experience.
Yeah, I did it for a few years, but I just decided to get out. When I had to pay the bills early on in my practice, I took whatever came in the door, man.
Yeah.
That's what you do, threshold practice. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm going to pull up the first one right here. And the first question is, once my divorce is finalized, can my ex try and come back for future money?
Yeah, well, wow, it's surprising me you're asking me this and not Erin, but yeah.
Well,
I'll take
the play, right? You
so
take a stab at it and
I think, let me know how I do here. So I think if it was a long-term marriage, like let's say it was a 20-year plus marriage and they did a simple divorce where no alimony was ordered, maybe they can come back later and say, hey, we got it wrong the first time. Maybe there should have been some alimony. But again, that's my crack on that situation. I think you can always reopen a case. Erin, am I right or wrong on that?
So for alimony, you would actually have to make sure that your court order says that you left alimony open in a specific way, or it's waived.
Really? So you can waive that? See, that's why I send family law stuff out. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Send it to you.
If it was something related to equitable distribution, right, come back for more money, like they said, I think the house is actually worth more money and I think I should get that. Or, I noticed we have this bank account that's pretty big bank account. you know, I actually think I do want your retirement, even though I didn't do that. Doesn't this sound
Would there? It does.
familiar? You can't actually. You need to address everything that arises out of the marital relationship. There are things that you can modify, right? Time sharing and child support, and if your circumstances are reserved properly, alimony, you could modify the amount or eliminate it.
I think that's good. It makes sense because you have to have closure. You know,
The door needs to close.
People need to be able to move on, get remarried, or stay single.
Yeah,
It's
right.
easier.
Stay
and not,
single,
and,
yeah.
and not have to worry about that always,
Yeah.
you know, lurking over them. So that does make sense.
Actually, I do have a follow up for this one, Erin. Like, so let's say, for example, you know, they had an uncontested divorce, they were signed off, everything good to go.
That's a mistake.
Then the ex-wife realizes, oh my God, I should have asked for alimony. Is there no turnsies backsies or?
Not if in their marital settlement agreement they don't address it, because if they don't address it and the form online says we have addressed all issues arising out of our marriage and there's no more, that phrase exists on the standard form. So you've waived it and it's gone. You didn't even know because you were like, you know, we don't need attorneys.
So no takesies backsies on that.
What about, is there like a colloquy? Because in criminal law, there's a long colloquy that every judge has to go through to make sure you're not under the influence of alcohol. I mean, can't
They do a little bit, you know. Have you entered into this agreement freely and voluntarily? Did anyone pressure you? It's a little bit more about that.
Right.
And not like, but do you know that you could get alimony payments? Like,
Right.
you know, it's not that. You don't get those kinds of advisement. You entered into this, you intend to be bound by
Don't
it.
you get that question from the notary when you're signing the document? Like, are you signing this under your own free will?
No, the notary just has to confirm that it's you who's signing the document. That's your only obligation under being a notary.
Wow, okay.
You're a notary.
Yes.
You ask if they're signing under free will. That's not your.
I've always, anytime like I've had someone sign a document that I'm notarizing, I want to make sure that they're not, one, they're not being pressured, two, that they understand what they're signing.
That's because you're a nice guy. You have no legal obligation under being a notary.
Yeah.
All you have to do is confirm this is you
That's
based
their
on
signature.
this ID,
Yeah.
and I saw you sign it. That's all I had to do.
Okay.
Now, how about what if somebody hires like a brand new lawyer with no experience and they go up against Erin Morse, right? And that's right. But I mean, let's say, you know, let's take a woman and she's been married to a guy for 20 years and she was a stay-at-home mom.
The shotgun sound effect right there.
Okay. And you know, her attorney says, look, we can't go to trial on this. Let's just take a deal. You guys just equitable distribution. Don't worry about his 401k or his pension. And you guys sign off on it. You do the marital settlement agreement. The judge signs a final order. And is she out of luck at that point? Can she have maybe a medical malpractice claim against her attorney for not doing a better, more thorough job?
I think it would be legal malpractice.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Oh, yeah. Right,
But
because it sure sounds like that would be the case under those circumstances.
so I, you know, and this is legal malpractice law, and I think my understanding of it is you're supposed to do as good of a job as like your skill and experience expected you to do. So I don't know that there would be legal malpractice. That's as good of a job
Yeah.
as a brand new attorney would be expected to do, right? Make sure you get divorced. That's what you want, right? And perhaps there was a good reason for you not wanting alimony, right? You wanted to be divorced quicker. There might have been a dollar value for you to get out of that marriage faster, to get away from him, because maybe she believes he's dangerous. You can't, and she knows she couldn't meet that burden in an injunction setting, but she knows that he was like, she was unsafe in some way, right? So maybe there is incredible value to, like, you know what, keep your money. If I take your money, I'm unsafe, and her life meant more than that, right? Or maybe she knew that she had a lot of earning potential if she didn't have the responsibility of like ironing his shirts and cooking his dinners. And if it was you know, an alimony thing or a 401k, she knew that she was going to have to like deal with him again, and she's like, that has value to me too.
Right. Yeah.
So you don't
Yeah.
know, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, all good points.
those are all things that I would say if they tried to come back and say this was unfair. I'd be like, who knows what you thought the value was on that? And I know I protected my client's 401k and alimony, and that was his goal, and you agreed to it, and you're allowed to do that. So if this divorce was valuable enough to you to get it over quick and not pay the attorney's fees, maybe that worked.
Mic drop.
No. So no, you know,
Erin's out.
and you know, and you again, I have one case where I feel like I quite literally begged my client, because my client was the higher earner and there was domestic violence. I represented her in the injunction and she was the victim and she asserted domestic violence, very, very much met her standard. And then in the injunction, he said more about a very much worse situation right to the judge. And the judge was like, did she consent to you doing that? And he was like, no. You know, like worse, right? So he was worse than she was willing to like go forward on, but she definitely needed the protection. So she settled and paid him alimony. And I was like, let me take this. I think I could make a good argument that you shouldn't have to agree to this. But for her, I begged her. I was like, please let me go to trial. I will take this. I will take this all the way down the road. I think I think we could make some good case law, because there wasn't in the case law this particular legal theory that I want to go on. Although the statute refers to it, it isn't explicit, but I think the argument would have gone well. I think it would have gone far. I think the judge would have been receptive to it, and I think she would have had success. She desired to have it over more than she didn't want that.
Now, you see, you just said something that just triggered me right now. And doing a little bit of criminal in the past, I want to ask you, Tom, like, when it comes to the decision of having to go to trial. Now, I understand, like, whether it's, you can't get an agreement with the state, that they're not budging, yet you have to go to trial. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that, in working family law as well, which one's more necessity when it comes to taking a case of trial in family law or in criminal?
Well, much different consequences.
Yeah.
You're looking at a government cage versus, losing your 401k or
right. I can give a best day and worst day
Yeah.
kind of outline, right? And their worst day is much worse.
Oh yeah. But at the end of the day, it really is up to the client's risk aversion. I've definitely had cases, that went to trial, and I told my client, like, I don't think this is a good idea. I think you're going down, but look, you always have a chance at trial, and we end up prevailing.
Yeah.
And then I've had just the opposite, where I'm like, hey, this is looking good, but I want you to be ready for the worst.
Yeah,
and then it does happen that they go down. So no attorney's ever going to get up here and say, hey, look, I've won every case I've ever had. If they do, they're full of crap.
Or I can guarantee your results. I
no.
tell my clients all the time, I'm like, if you have an attorney guaranteeing results,
Mm-hmm.
run.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah. So you brought up something interesting earlier that I want to follow up with, if you don't mind. So, like, let's say, for example, a rape case, one of the worst crimes a human being can do onto another human being.
Agreed.
And I do a lot of victim representation. So I have a particular client who it was just terrible. It was a sexual battery or rape, penile vaginal, and absolutely just physically, emotionally, psychologically distraught by it.
Right.
Okay, making it hard for her to go back to work. Very much a professional, high earning capacity, devastated by this attack, and she never wanted to do anything civilly about it. She goes, nope, the prosecutors are going to handle everything. It's been like 3 or 4 years now. Right. And I said, we also have a civil cause of action against him for intentional infliction of emotional distress and battery. And that has a lot of value. I don't care about that. I just want, and I don't want them to think I'm going after money. But after promotions have been passed up, after all the psychologist and therapist bills are adding up, she's like, you know what? I don't want to do it, Tom, but I think I have to. Otherwise, I'm going to be financially devastated because of what happened. And everybody has different levels of resiliency. Yeah. Some people can have that happen to them and they bounce right back. Most people won't, obviously, and some people take it a lot harder, and everything in between. But I think there's always going to be an economic impact there. And so we can do that. Even though there's a pending criminal case, it's totally good with the Florida bar, even, battery, domestic violence, but specifically sexual.
And I want to get your take on this, because this is where my legal mind goes, right? Is perhaps through your civil case, you have the ability and capacity to uncover certain things and get some evidence or some testimony or responsiveness that isn't able to be acquired by the state through the criminal, and perhaps you could hand it over or whatever, or vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. Something like that. Is that a strategy at times?
I think whatever's in the best interest of the client you can do, as long as it's copacetic with the Florida bar rules. But For the most part, when we do a civil action against somebody and there's a pending criminal case, they're going to assert the fifth. And,
Of course.
you know,
But and I have this question because it's coming up in one of my cases. So I'm gonna pose it to you.
and then I have a trivia question for you after this. So
All right. This one's kind of like legal trivia a little bit.
Okay.
So if someone has a pending criminal case and there is a civil cause of action and they are not the respondent or defendant in the civil cause of action, they're just a party to it, right? But it is overlapping with their criminal cause of action. So they're called as a witness to be deposed.
in the criminal case or in the civil case?
In the civil case. Okay. And to establish some facts that don't relate to the victim for the crime and that whatever. And then there's some things about the victim and the crime. Can their defense attorney ask for, a wholesale protective order to even appear at a deposition, or are they required to appear and assert specifically that Fifth Amendment?
I wish I had a clear answer. I haven't had that particular scenario come up, so I don't candidly know.
I think I do.
But we can look into it together.
But I'll be fighting it. I have it coming up. Yeah.
That would be that is interesting because hey, they're because and it might be in everybody's interest for them to do that, because if they do appear at the depot, they can just take the fifth the whole time and it'd be a huge waste of time for
So what's your perspective on the reality that if in a civil case they take the fifth, right? Obviously that can't be used against them in a criminal court of law.
Right.
But that particular assertion can be used against them in a civil court of law.
Yeah. What's your question on that?
How can I get it if it's not through a deposition and I don't ask the question for which you assert the Fifth Amendment?
Circumstantial.
I will have to ask the question and you have to assert it. So therefore, you must appear at the deposition.
It happens all the time. Look, it happens all the time.
That's my argument, okay?
The best example I have is domestic violence.
Come on, Judge Feiter, rule in my favor.
I'm with you. But we see it all the time in civil injunction court. It's like somebody's arrested for battery domestic violence.
Yep.
The victim also goes through Harbor House or one of these other awesome organizations and gets a victim advocate or a attorney to represent them. And they try to call the respondent or the criminal defendant, and they just assert the fifth. It's like
that's okay.
Yeah, it's like, but at the end of the day, you can't. It's a lower standard of evidence. It's a preponderance in a civil court, and if the respondent isn't going to respond, then it makes the judge's job that much easier to grant the injunction.
Exactly. So it is my position that they'd have to show up for the deposition. So assert your Fifth Amendment. I'm not saying you can't.
Right.
But do it. Let me ask the question and assert it. No problem.
So here's a question, or somewhat of a trivia question, is if a petitioner wants to get an injunction against your client, and she says it's a petition for battery domestic violence, and the woman says, you know what, we've been married for 12 years, 2 years into our marriage, you punched me in the face. I was a victim of domestic violence, and and 10 years later here in 2022, I want an injunction against him for that. Is that enough to get an injunction? What do you think?
I would say no, because it's outside the statute of limitations.
No, it's not the statute of limitations. I don't know the statute of limitation.
Okay.
But my argument would be the imminency isn't present. It's the imminency. You have to have a fear of imminent harm. So in fact, the reverse of that, you could get an injunction if they've never actually had domestic violence, but you're fearful that it's imminent and the threat was there. How about that? So the guy who hit his wife 2 years ago won't get an injunction, but the guy who just maybe made a threat because he was angry can.
So the absence of evidence.
Imminency.
Yeah.
That it's imminent.
Okay. I mean,
am I right?
So they would still be.
You are mostly right. This is why it's a trivia question. Because there's never going to be
there's no good answer. It's not that cut and dry.
Whatever's intuitive, guess the opposite.
Yeah.
So yes, normally, especially in the fifth DCA here, it used to be, look, you can get a domestic violence injunction one of two ways: either that you were the victim of domestic violence, or that you were in imminent danger of becoming the victim of domestic violence. So in that particular scenario that I painted, technically, yes, she was the victim of domestic violence, but it was so far ago, so long ago in time that it's like, it's so remote. And it used to be that, it has to be or some remoteness in time. But there was a new case that came out in 2021 that said, and this is out of the fourth DCA, that said, look, if you're the victim, and we read here, an act of domestic violence, even an act of domestic violence which is remote in time, is sufficient under Florida statute 741.282 for a court to enter a domestic violence injunction.
Wow.
That's
So-
good though. It should be, right?
Yeah.
Because the most dangerous time is when you're leaving.
Right. That's true too. That's,
Right.
yeah.
So that the logic behind it, in my opinion, is sound. I'm sure that that's not the logic they use, but I believe that.
Right. The
You know.
troubling part for, I think, any practitioner would be like, hey, I want this much money in the divorce. No? Okay. I'm going to go file this injunction. And 12 years ago, you hit me. It's like, how do you defend against something that's so far ago in time?
I would make, on 12 years, I would make the 10-year evidentiary argument.
Yeah, you can. But look,
I know.
And she's right. The SOL statute of limitations doesn't come into play, but it is remote in time. But, the statute clearly says anyone who's been the victim of domestic violence has standing to get an injunction.
Yeah.
So if the judge finds the victim credible and says, look, I believe, yes, 10 years ago, you were the victim of
Was that the
domestic
fifth
violence.
DCA?
No, this is the fourth.
Good.
So, right. Yeah.
It's not binding.
But
No,
it's
just
not.
kidding. Yeah.
But I
No,
can
but
see
yeah.
that
But with
interpretation.
the actions of the petitioner itself, the fact that they remained with them for such a long time.
I'm gonna interject right here because you know what just happened.
Uh.
You blame the victim.
I
Yeah.
did.
It's a very delicate area. It's very dangerous.
It's hard.
If you, yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
hard for courts to straddle over. Like,
Yep.
if I say, why did you stay? Am I blaming the victim?
I mean,
And
this is probably a bad example, but the altar boy who's now 45 years old, when I was 8 years old, the priest did this to me.
yeah.
It's like, well, why didn't you say something the past 37 years or however long it's been?
Mhm.
It's
Gee.
none of your business. I've been doing my best I could to cope with it.
Also,
and to,
perhaps at 8 years old, my mother was like, "You do what the priest says." I know,
Mhm.
I come from old
Yeah.
Irish Catholic
yeah.
family, right?
Oh, yeah.
That before
And I'm
this
sorry
became,
for making that analogy.
right.
But
No,
yeah.
but I get it, and it's true. And like these are hard topics. But you're right. Why didn't you come forward before? Well, because before I wasn't an attorney who now knows how to be someone else's advocate, and perhaps maybe I'm strong enough to be an advocate for myself now.
And I did hear from another attorney who's local here, and she's amazing. And she said one of the worst things, and I really took this to heart because it was at a domestic violence luncheon for the OCBA. And she said one of the worst things anybody asks a victim of domestic violence is, well, why didn't you do something sooner? It's like, it's really, it's almost offensive to them. And I can't relate in that respect, but I just respect that point of view, and I'm understanding more. And that's
I have said that in a
but-
courtroom.
Yeah.
I really have.
Yeah.
Where opposing counsel or even the judge has said, like, why didn't you come home sooner? And I'm like, Your Honor, objection. I said, that's not on the point of relevance.
right.
I said, secondly, I'm like, I understand that I am engaging in a speaking objection, but that is blaming the victim. And if we don't clarify and it's not spoken up about, we will continue to think that that's acceptable, and it's not.
Here's another point that's going to
Didn't work a couple times, worked other times.
Wonderful for making that argument, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But here's another point that's really hard for people to grasp, and I'm struggling with this now, even with local prosecutors here in throughout the state of Florida, is when a victim wants the case dropped. I saw this a lot because I'm a judge advocate in the Army and the Reserve, and I dealt with this on the when I was active duty and deployed. We had victims of sexual battery, sexual
Right.
assault, like
Right.
rape victims,
Yeah.
and the commanders were livid. They're like, this is awful. We need to eradicate sexual assault from the military. We're making that our number one priority. And I applaud them for doing that. But sometimes you get a commander who wasn't a lawyer. He's like, I want that guy who did it. And the evidence could have been overwhelming against him. I want him out of here. I want him prosecuted, court-martialed, sent to prison, or they call it barracks in the Army. And if the victim wants it dropped, it has to be dropped. Because sometimes putting a victim through that, the criminal justice process and forcing them to relive it and be subject to cross-examine is worse. So it's hard, even for prosecutors, like, wait. She's a victim. This is an evil person. He did this to her. Or maybe it's something less, like
Right.
battery, domestic violence. Like, oh, this is the third time he's done this to another woman. She's coming to trial. We're going to do a material witness warrant on her. We're getting her to trial because he's got to go away.
Right.
It's terrible. Can't do it. Judges have been admonished by the Supreme Court for forcing victims to come when they didn't want to.
Well-
You have to put the victim's well-being, I think, first, and that's paramount.
No, and 100% on that. And the reason why I asked that, why they keep going back, do you feel that it's the assailant who has just done so much mental abuse to
Sometimes.
them that they're like, and I've
or their career, right? Because then the only thing, say they're in some type of circumstance at all where their employment might have any public, shining in any form. Every time that victim is mentioned on the internet, right? The internet doesn't die now. It's tied to this case. So it's harming her career because it's harming perhaps this person who she had a career by the side of, and who knows who's standing alongside this. Like, there's just a lot of layers to it. Coming forth as a victim, in my experience, is hard and not easy. And in many instances, the way that we handle these types of crimes in our society overall, not just the justice system, but in our society, makes it not worth it. Which is awful, because how do you stop it if they don't come forward? And how do you also respect them if you're like, no, but if you don't come forward, we can't stop it? And they're like, yeah, but it's not worth it. This is making it worse.
Well, at least, by reporting it, there's a record that's created. So even if they beat the charge the first time, okay, next time. And there's also, the Williams rule thing, because sometimes you'll have a guy who's accused of lewd or lascivious molestation on one girl, and then once that's made public, another girl comes forward, and even though she didn't report it, or let's say they missed the statute of limitations, which would be hard, but they can still use that as Williams rule evidence in the subsequent criminal trial against them, which is great, or powerful for the state.
Yeah, so. It's messy.
Yeah, it is. It's just it's all, I think, human relations, and just part of the human condition is just having to, we want to do justice as lawyers, as prosecutors, as judges. We want to see justice done.
Right. And we want to win.
Oh,
I will admit it. I will admit it. I take cases and I'm like, but I could win this for you and do justice for you.
But see, everybody has a different definition of winning. Yeah. Like, you can have somebody, let's say a guy who wants to get divorced. He goes, I want full custody or majority time sharing with my kids. Right. I want to have my kids, and I want to be, in charge of their school. And you can say, hey, man, I'll win. I might win this battle, but you're going to lose the war. Because what if those kids, someday they're going to get married, and if they hate you, and the mother, or the father, whoever, it is, you're going to be at that wedding. If they hate you and they're going to grow up and they're never going to let you see the grandkids, you really lost. So I tell people, be careful of, what winning means to you right now, because sometimes when we win, we really lose. And sometimes when we lose, we really win. So sometimes I'll extend an olive branch and say, look, we're going to lose this one because we know in the long term, you're going to be happier. So sometimes people are so close to the forest, they can't see the trees, and you have to help them.
I definitely have had a circumstance, and this was a while ago, where someone came forward to me and they were the victim of domestic violence, and he was a male. And he came to me and was like, I think I want to terminate her parental rights. I was like, you do not meet the standard for that. I'm going to start there.
And this is the biological mother. He wanted to terminate her parental rights.
It's his wife.
Yeah. Oh, his wife. Yeah.
He's like, but she abandoned us because she went to the beach for 3 days and didn't tell us where she was going once.
That's not enough.
Ago. I was like,
it's not enough. That's crazy.
That's not abandonment. Okay. So, but and I get it. And I understand that I'm savvy, and, perhaps there were other things that we could put together. I could, at a minimum, file it. I could take this down a path. And in my mind, I'm like, not, I would do this. I won't. I literally was like, absolutely not. I will absolutely not do this. But, from a financial standpoint, a case of that magnitude, to try to do that is financially expensive. So, and I tried to have this conversation with him. I'm like, I want you to know that the advice I'm giving you is not in my financial best interest. This case that you're asking for is very expensive, very time consuming, and would be financially beneficial for me.
I'd make a lot of money.
I would make a lot of money on you.
But at the end of the day,
you are upset with me right now because I'm telling you, no, you are more mad at me because I'm like, the harm you will do to your children to try to delete their mom from their life. I can't. I'm like, I can't. I can't move forward with it.
Yeah.
Is the juice worth the squeeze at that point?
The only person who would win in this scenario are the
lawyers.
Attorneys.
Yeah.
The attorneys are the only person who would gain any benefit. The end of this, when I try to talk to my clients and explain to them, like, the end of this episode, right? Imagining that your case was like a 1 hour episode. Obviously which requires a lot of work. I'm like, but if your case were a 1 hour episode, the end of this episode does not result in what you're asking me right now.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, it doesn't. This episode.
See, it's tough because you have more of that foresight in family law cases. In criminal, it can go either way.
Yeah, you
Same
don't.
thing with PI settlements and verdicts. It's like you never know what a jury's going to do.
Right.
So you just have, it's human nature. It's a lot about serendipity, I think.
And we've all had cases where maybe we shouldn't have won.
Yeah.
It's the truth, right? We win them, and I'm like, that okay.
Yep.
Walk out of the courtroom faster, right? Don't give them a chance to change their mind. Go, go, go. And then there are some where you really should have won. This should have turned out better.
That's what's heartbreaking.
And I have these instances sometimes where I'm like, man, if I could appeal this, right? If the cost, I could appeal this, God, I would have my name on another appeal that I think would be very successful. Like, this didn't follow the law. And sometimes my clients are like, I understand, and the judge did get it wrong. And that was the gamble.
That's
why we had to advise them, right? This is your gamble.
We need good judges.
And the appeals court exists only because trial courts can get it wrong. So you have a remedy. It's just expensive.
But it is expensive. Yeah.
So question 2.
See, we do this. We could do this all day.
Too easy.
Here you go, Tom. My time sharing plan states that the kids are to be with me for spring break. We are going to Spain, but my 16-year-old refuses to get vaccinated. Would this put my ex in contempt if I can't have him on my time?
Boy, I'm glad I'm not doing family law anymore. But I would
what's
say
the standard
no.
for consent?
Yeah, no. I mean, it has to be willful, and she didn't. I mean,
what does the order need to be?
You tell
clear.
Me yeah.
The order needs to be clear. What court order says your 16-year-old needs to be vaccinated for COVID? I can guarantee that there are very few, if any, parenting plans that say you have to be vaccinated for COVID. The children have to be vaccinated. We don't put that in parenting plans.
Yeah. I would say my answer was no. So
you're right.
Okay.
I completely agree. It just, the order has to be clear and unambiguous, and it has to be a willful and intentional violation, and you had to have had the ability to comply with it.
I mean, I guess it would be different if the other spouse was intentionally telling the child, don't get vaccinated, and that'll screw up their vacation. Okay, that might be different because that shows malice. But
it wouldn't be contempt, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to do like a motion to compel, or you would ask that a motion to compel, a motion to require the children to get vaccinated.
But just by virtue of somebody asking that, it just shows a litigious nature of family law. And that's why repeat clients are, that's the nice thing about family law is a lot of my clients, they're one and done. They'll never come back, but family law is an ongoing thing.
And there's some times where I have clients who reach back out to me, and I'm like, and they reach out to me, in this scenario, right? I really think my children need to be vaccinated. I would like their health to be well cared for, and my spouse won't agree, and we have shared parental responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, well, what do I do?
What do you do with that? I mean, a judge isn't going to order one way or the other.
They will actually.
Really?
What they do, and so it's not necessarily that they will order vaccinations. They allow one parent to make the decision.
With a 16-year-old kid?
What if the
kid says,
I was just going to say,
make me, mom.
For the 16-year-old, well, they're not a decision maker, right?
Yeah.
So however you get your child under control, and if your child is out of control, that's a discipline issue. And I am sorry if that's how they are, but this court doesn't have power over that.
Wow. Next question coming in. My husband is going through his will, and he is planning on leaving 1/3 of our house to his son, 1/3 to his daughter, and 1/3 to my daughter. Can he legally do this? We own it together.
As a married couple?
He wants to leave 1/3 of the house to each of those children.
Yes.
And effectively disinherit the wife.
Correct.
Okay. I don't think so. I mean, you can't.
You own the house by tenancy by the entirety.
Well, what if he owns it? It's just him.
It's just him, yes, he can do that.
But don't you have to leave a certain amount to support the surviving spouse? What is that called? It's like curtilage or something. I can't remember.
I think you can disinherit your spouse.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
That's a.
I know in the Army you can't. In the military you can't just.
I know that.
Yeah.
So sometimes when my client's spouse is in the military, I'm like, call his officer.
I'm putting the it depends side right now. So.
Well,
Good.
I think that's a question for somebody who litigates wills, trusts, and estates, and I don't litigate that. I know that if, as a married couple, when you're married and you own a home together, you own it as tenancy by the entirety. I feel like I'm back in law school because I also don't do real estate.
Who uses those words, right?
Right, but it's an undivided whole that you own the home.
Yep.
So unless you have some other ownership interest in the house. But if it was a premarital home, why would the wife be,
Well, if she held, there might be some passive appreciation that she was entitled to.
That's a divorce analysis, not a death one.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I have to get in deeper on it. It's
Put them on the
though.
deed instead of inheriting them.
Okay. Okay.
Break that tendency by the entirety.
So this one, I feel that you would actually be able to give us a solid answer for this one. And I'm pulling it up right now.
Don't be so sure.
Would the commenting by a respondent on a TikTok post or any social media violate an injunction?
It could. I think it absolutely could. It depends on the audience and if it's the
petitioner's TikTok.
It's a petitioner. Okay, if again, I was going to ask where it was posted.
Yeah, I make up facts. If they ask a question and I don't have enough facts, I'm like, I'm going to assume this is a fact.
Okay, gotcha.
That's how we get to
so.
do
But
these.
I mean, if it was her TikTok account, and I'm assuming it works like Facebook and Instagram where you
Same
post
idea.
something. Okay, good. All right. So yeah, if you respond, absolutely, yeah, that's direct contact. That's a violation of the injunction. Now, if it was a third party, like let's say someone, just a mutual friend, and I think a judge or a court could, depending on the context of the comment, and if it was reasonably likely that the petitioner would see it and be troubled by it. I mean, it just depends on the context.
Now, I'm sorry to ask this one. This is kind of a rabbit hole right here.
Yeah.
Let's say my ex-girlfriend, her friend comments on my video, what makes a snarky comment.
Yeah.
But then not comments on my post, but replies to the friend's comment. Would that be considered a violation?
So it's contact, right?
So it's still contact, but not
and-
directed to the creator, but to the person posting the comment. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't think it's wise for that person to do that.
Mm.
you're
I think
asking for trouble. How about that?
I mean, look,
yeah.
if anything, maybe the petitioner could do a motion for contempt, and you can get dragged back into court and you have to answer to it. Why would you want to put yourself through that and expose yourself to additional attorney's fees and waste of time? But some people are just bored, and I really do feel this. I feel like some people are just bored and they want drama, and they're just looking for that.
Clients.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, do you need a
We're all-
hobby? I'm real busy. You want to come over to?
We're all different. Yeah, I don't know what motivates some people like that, but I've definitely seen it.
Yeah.
We're going to do two more, and then we're going to do Erin Reacts and wrap it up here. But the next one is my husband and I started our divorce process. He moved out and has started going out with my boss. Is there anything I can do to stop this bullcrap? Any motions?
So the couple is getting divorced, and the husband or the wife is dating the boss.
He moved out.
He moved out. So the husband is dating his boss or her boss.
Her boss.
I mean, no, man. It's like I think it might be a problem depending on where he works. If it's a big corporation, the corporation might have a problem with him dating a married woman. But
I mean, no one said the boss was married.
no.
Objection, facts, not evidence. No one said the boss was married. What if the boss isn't married and he doesn't work at that corporation? But what a way to get back at your wife,
Yeah.
No, there's nothing you can do. Get your divorce, be compliant, be agreeable, and get out of there. Maybe that's
I
the
agree.
woman who wants to waive the 401k and alimony so she can be divorced faster.
Yeah. I agree, Erin. Yeah.
So, that sometimes that was a good bargain for exchange, right? That's what I'm going to tell the judge.
So, final question coming in here. My ex-girlfriend won't stop calling or contacting me after our breakup. I can't file an injunction because there has been no threat. What can I do?
Won't stop calling you?
Calling or contacting him.
Mm-hmm.
What can he do to stop this if there's been no threat?
You don't need a threat for it to be considered stalking. What you do need is the ex. Is it the girlfriend being contacted by the ex-boyfriend?
No, the ex-girlfriend contacting the boyfriend.
Boyfriend. Okay, he needs to tell her, leave me alone unequivocally. Don't ever contact me again. If she continues 2 or 3 times, probably not going to be sufficient for stalking, because I've had these injunctions go before very seasoned, experienced judges, and they're like, sir, ma'am, that's just not enough for stalking. They just loved you. You broke their heart. They're trying to get back with you, not stalking. But 100 times, creating different email accounts, creating different, phone numbers, because all you need for stalking is willful, repeated, malicious harassing or cyber stalking.
So
And
this comes up for me often, and now that I know you'll do these type of injunctions, I'm sending them over.
yeah,
Because I, it's not my area. Domestic violence, I have some, but stalking and those kind of things are
Yeah.
not. What do you think is the definition of repeated? What is the standard for repeated to meet the threshold of it being, that harassing, stalking versus it just being
Yeah.
an annoying ex?
Yeah, I mean, look, for stalking, you just need 2 incidents, and I think there has to be some temporal gap. So it can't be like an email and then another email from the same email address. That's not enough. I mean,
Right.
I think if it's a dozen contacts from more than one source, okay, that's going to be enough. I mean, it really could be an email and a text after you've said, "Leave me the hell alone." If they keep at it, that could be considered stalking. But I think if you only have those 2 contacts, that's where the context of the contacts would come into play. Whereas if they're really nasty or something, I mean, you have to show malice.
Mhm.
That's an element. It's not, willful or malicious. It's willful and malicious. So after you say no, I don't think there's any clear-cut answer. I think the judges have some latitude here. However they define whatever. When does it cross that threshold into trying to get back together and being malicious? You can send flowers all the time, but at a certain point it gets creepy,
Right.
and it makes somebody feel uncomfortable. And don't forget, the other element for stalking is it has to create in a reasonable person a substantial emotional distress.
So the malice part is a little bit more important than the amount of times.
I think so. Absolutely. And that's where
That makes sense.
But if it's not threatening, if it's just like, "Hey, I love you," but if somebody says that to you 100 times over a course of months or weeks, it's like kind of gets creepy. And that might, stress you out. And depending on the length of the relationship, if you only went out on 2 dates and somebody's doing that for a long time, okay, that's really creepy a lot. So if you went out for 5 years.
Netflix series.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. That's why, like 5 years, if you're going out for 5 years and this keeps up for 6 months, it's like, okay, that's kind of what a person should expect having been in a long-term relationship.
Right.
Like that.
Right.
So yeah.
That doesn't mean do it.
Yeah.
No. But you can get an injunction under circumstances depending on the the details.
Thank you so much for your input and your legal expertise on those questions. I love this time. This was awesome.
This is a great episode.
Now we're entering Erin Reacts, where I give Erin a topic or a news video or something to her to react to. And
what's the nature of it?
It is.
I don't have a laptop today.
It's a story that came out.
A story. So you're gonna tell me.
I'm going to tell you the story.
All right.
And I know you and I have watched this because I brought it up, and you actually got the joke. So, Tinder swindler breaks silence, claims he isn't a monster. All right.
Did you watch that?
No.
The Tinder swindler?
No, I don't know what that is.
It's on Netflix.
Okay.
So it's a crime documentary.
Okay, no, I haven't seen it.
About this guy who's on Tinder, and he convinces these women that he is the son of a diamond billionaire.
Mm-hmm.
So that he's basically a billionaire. He takes them out on very lavish dates, stays at very private jets, like very extreme. And this happens primarily in Europe, but it does have he has some American victims.
Okay.
But very lavish dates, in high-end couture clothing, everything, like the maximum that you can imagine. And you come to find out that what he does is he will be in this relationship with them, and they believe that he's a billionaire because of what he had portrayed and even the dates that he had taken them out on. And then at some point he goes, people are after me, right? It's this blood diamonds kind of, fearful, my enemies are after me, and they've frozen my assets, and they can follow me by my credit cards. I need to use your credit card to do this. And he has like security, and he has employees who obviously work for him and all that. He's like, and I need to get a hotel so that I'm safe, and I need to.
Yeah.
So he swindles them out of their money, tells them to take out loans.
Thousands of dollars.
I think, what was it, in the 10 million is what they estimate
terrible.
That he's swindled his Tinder
Wow,
dates out of.
This is fascinating.
Yeah. So, and there's multiple of them, right? They kind of had all come forward. There's a lot of And so
and there is multiple evidence, and the video recordings, audio recordings, documents that were exchanged.
Yeah, because they're WhatsApp communications, right?
Okay,
So
yeah.
he'll speak to text or the audio recordings,
voice messages.
the voice
that
messages
that get sent over. In the article, in the interview, he says, "I was surprised how many girls wanted me, and how many girls offered to travel to meet me without knowing me. I am not this monster that everyone has created." What is your take on just that statement alone? Because you watched the documentary.
I sure did.
And it was intense.
It was. I'm
going to add right before you answer that. I am a legit businessman, he said, denying any wrongdoing and claiming the women interviewed in the Netflix documentary weren't coned and they weren't threatened. He denied ever presenting himself as a son. Conned. Wow, I said coned.
You got it. Yeah. No worries.
Presenting himself as the son of an Israeli Russian diamond tycoon.
But they didn't know him, right? So he isn't related to them, right? That family.
No. Yeah.
I think that he's just trying to save face, right? He thinks if he could con all these women out of $10 million, he can obviously continue to con. If those are, it's true, right? And I guess I'm not the jury, and I am also not the prosecutor of this, but he was prosecuted in some ways.
Yes.
And I do think that it looks like that these people were conned. I think that he thinks he can continue to con people.
Mm-hmm.
So of course that would be his statement. He wouldn't be like, "Oh man, you got me." Man, I just
got away with it for a while. But,
they were pretty silly, but you got me. No,
he only served a fraction of the sentence that was given to him.
So he was found guilty of this.
He was found guilty
in a court of competent jurisdiction.
But I think it was in just one country. Now, mind you, like these transactions happened, all throughout Europe.
And I think his cross these lines, these country lines, is probably what ends up protecting him. Is it's a woman who's from Sweden while the transaction is happening in Italy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. So these countries don't have this jurisdiction to kind of pull him in, because where did the fraud happen, right? With her in Sweden. So Sweden should prosecute, but the transaction, she gives him the card number, right?
Yeah.
So, that's,
I mean, if she knowingly gave the money to him, but under false pretenses, that's the problem.
But he said, "I need the money for a hotel." He uses the money for a hotel. So I get that the reason why he said he doesn't have the money is not true, but he wanted your card for a hotel.
Was there a promise to pay it back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he doesn't.
But he never does.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. This is interesting. Reminds me of Criminal Law 101. Malum in se versus malum prohibitum. It's just intrinsically evil what he's doing.
It is.
But it's like, people date, and there's people who mislead other people into thinking.
It's true.
And you do certain things under those presumptions, and they turn out not to be true. But it's an interesting dilemma.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't believe him.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely think. Absolutely think he's a criminal.
Yeah,
sure.
These are crimes
worthy of punishment. But
I don't know how.
I don't know.
How do I figure that out? Right? I don't know. And I'm glad it's not up to me.
And you saw at the end of that documentary, he's still living that lavish lifestyle.
He
because
is.
He's
all over
now.
Instagram.
He's all over the place, and these victims are still paying for everything that
the debts that they've incurred.
It's literally a lifetime debt now.
Yeah.
There's just some people out there that I think are just missing part of their soul. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's an interesting documentary. I think it's a documentary on Netflix called Tickled.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen that one?
No.
Very disturbing. Check out Tickled.
Okay.
It's terrible.
I will.
Yeah.
It's not about the underground tickling competition. I did see that one. Yeah.
Really disturbing.
Yes.
What is it?
It's called Tickled. Yeah.
What's it about?
It's about a very wealthy guy who stays behind closed doors and gates. You can't get to him. But what he does is, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my memory of it. It's been a few years, but he would pay young men to, allow themselves to be tied up on camera and restrained, and have somebody come tickle them. because like a competition.
I hate it.
Yeah, and what he
I hate it.
you know, but he would give somebody like, oh, I'll give you $500 cash or something, and then they, sure, I'm in college, I need to get by, and so yeah, it sounds great, of course, no big deal. But then he would send it. I think he would extort them, and he would send it to their family. He goes, what is your dad going to think of you now? And he goes, I'm going to make sure this gets played at your wedding. And it's like, how it's just shameful, isn't that? It's just it just goes down that path to show like the darkness of the human mind.
What really triggered that my thought when you said that was revenge porn.
Yeah, big area of law. Yep. Terrible. Yeah, just awful. And it's just some people are just really sick.
Wedding.
Yeah. I mean, talk about emotional distress.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just awful. Some people are just, and that's,
I can't imagine. I'm sometimes reminded in scenarios like that I'm a fairly aggressive personality, because I'm like, I could imagine someone saying that about my husband. I'd be like, think about the brick you're going to be landed on, right? Like,
But the thing is, you couldn't find the person. He was sending it through different servers, and it's like, you can't track him down. No law enforcement could ever touch him, so they couldn't find him. So he's like, invisible person.
Crazy as the whole story.
But how would he want to receive the money? Could they?
He didn't care about money.
Yeah,
he was independently wealthy. I think he was a trust fund person, and he just came into
it to fuck with people. This is just
and that's what I'm saying is, some people are just intrinsically evil.
Want to watch the world burn.
That's the best from Batman.
Yeah. We're big superhero
ruby
people.
the size of a tangerine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is absolutely true. I've been to some very dark places and seen some very dark people, and it's I think for the most part we have to protect our community from these people.
Yeah.
Tom, once again, thank you so much for coming in, taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with us. I love this. This was one of my favorite episodes. I have your law firm website on the screen. Go ahead and plug whatever you need to plug.
Oh, sure. I mean, you've heard what I do. I do criminal defense, personal injury, victim representation, and injunctions. So restraining orders, anything like that, I'd be happy to help. I fight for people because I care. And if they're looking for aggressive representation like they have here with Erin, I'm your man.
Awesome. www.feiterlaw.com. Check them out. Tom Feiter here in Central Florida. Erin, actually, before I go to you, I'm going to plug myself real quick because I got something coming up. If you would like to win tickets to the next screening of the new Batman film, check me out at Graffiti Junction this Wednesday, giving over $100 in prizes to the winners, and also tickets to a private screening of the new Batman film. So come check it out, Graffiti Junction in Thornton Park. Erin, your final thoughts as we close out.
Well, don't believe that guy on Tinder. It's really our thoughts today. And I don't know, stay safe. Don't trust people, I guess. Unless it's